An old photo I found on Google Drive led to my divorce, and something much worse. It wasn't the photo itself that drew blood. It was the metadata, that sterile, unblinking digital footprint that whispers the truths we try to drown in Chardonnay and lies. It was 2 in the morning. The house was breathing that heavy, settled silence that only exists in the suburbs when the money is old and the marriages are stale. I was migrating files, a digital spring cleaning of our shared cloud storage. The vault, Mark called it. He was asleep upstairs, sprawled in the center of our California king, his mouth likely open, dreaming of mergers and acquisitions. I was downstairs, bathed in the necro-blue light of my MacBook, scrolling through 5 years of business trips. That was the folder name. Innocent. Mundane. I clicked on Chicago, September 2022. I remembered that trip. He had called me from the hotel, breathless, complaining about the wind off the lake and the subpar room service.
I remembered because I had sent him a care package of his favorite compression socks the day before he left. I opened a file named img4920.heic. It was a picture of a steak, a ribeye, medium rare, glistening under the low, romantic lighting of a high-end steakhouse. Harmless, just Mark documenting his dinner, a man obsessed with the aesthetics of his consumption. But I zoomed in, not on the meat, but on the knife, the polished silver steel of the steak knife resting on the white tablecloth. The curvature of the blade held a reflection. It was warped, fish-eyed, and small, but the resolution of the new iPhone is a dangerous thing for a liar. I pinched the trackpad, expanding the pixels until they blurred into impressionist smears, then sharpened again. There was Mark, his tie loosened, that smug grin I used to mistake for charm, and across from him, holding a glass of red wine, was not a client. It was a shoulder, a bare, slender shoulder in a strap of emerald green silk, and a hand resting intimately on his wrist, a hand with a distinct, gaudy diamond ring on the pinky finger.
I knew that ring. I had paid for the manicure that highlighted it just 3 weeks ago. It belonged to Jessica, my yoga instructor, my friend, the woman who told me my chakras were blocked while she was sleeping with my husband. But that wasn't the nail in the coffin. The nail was the info tab. I clicked it, my heart hammering a frantic, wet rhythm against my ribs. Date, September 14th, 2022. Time, 8:14 p.m. Location, it didn't say Chicago, Illinois. The GPS coordinates were stubbornly, factually precise. Cabo San Lucas, Mexico. The room spun. The air conditioning kicked on with a low rumble, sounding like a beast waking up in the walls. He wasn't in the Windy City. He was in Cabo, with Jessica, eating steak and laughing at me. I sat there for an hour, the blue light burning my redness. The grief came first, a hot, suffocating wave. Then the shock. But around 3 a.m., the temperature of my blood changed. It cooled. It slowed. It solidified into something hard and jagged. I could have marched upstairs. I could have woken him up with a scream that shattered the windows.
I could have thrown the laptop at his head and demanded a divorce right then and there. But Mark was a narcissist. He thrived on conflict. He loved to be the calm, rational one, while I played the hysterical wife. If I screamed, he would win. He would spin it. He would gaslight me until I apologized for invading his privacy. No, I closed the laptop. I took a sip of my lukewarm water. Divorce was inevitable, but divorce is a legal proceeding. It's paperwork. It's assets and alimony. It's boring. Mark hated boring. Mark loved drama, provided he was the director. I decided, in the quiet dark of our kitchen, that I wouldn't just leave him. I would dismantle him. I would take the man who prided himself on his image, his control, and his intellect, and I would turn him into a punchline. I would gaslight him back, but I would do it with the precision of a neurosurgeon and the creativity of a chaotic god. I walked upstairs, slipped into bed beside him, and listened to his breathing. It was steady, arrogant. "Sleep tight, darling," I whispered into the darkness.
The show starts tomorrow. The morning sun hit the bedroom with the subtlety of a flashbang grenade. Mark woke up stretching, groaning with that exaggerated masculinity he put on like a suit. He looked at me, flashed that white-toothed smile, and said, "Morning, babe, coffee." "Already made," I said, my voice sweet, laced with arsenic he couldn't taste. He went to the bathroom to start his ritual. Mark was a man of rituals: the exfoliating scrub, the toner, the serum, the moisturizer, the hair gel. He treated his body like a temple where he was the only god worthy of worship. This was my entry point. I had spent the remaining hours of the night in the garage, locating my supplies. I didn't want to hurt him physically, not permanently. I wanted to hurt his vanity. Step 1. The shrinking man. Mark was obsessed with his physique. He weighed himself every morning and tracked his body fat percentage in an Excel spreadsheet. Over the next 3 weeks, I didn't change his diet. I didn't tamper with the scale. Instead, I visited a seamstress in the next town over.
Every Tuesday and Thursday, when Mark was at the gym, I took 3 of his custom-tailored Italian suits and had them taken in by exactly 4 millimeters. Just a fraction. Imperceptible to the eye, but undeniable to the body. By week 2, the psychological rot had set in. We were getting ready for a dinner party. Mark was putting on his navy Xenia suit. He pulled the trousers up and frowned. He sucked in his gut, buttoned the waist, and exhaled. The fabric strained. "Is the dry cleaner shrinking things?" he muttered, twisting in front of the mirror.
"I don't think so," I said, applying mascara with a steady hand. "Maybe you're just retaining water. Stress eating?" He looked at me, offended. "I don't stress eat, Elena. I'm in peak condition." "Of course, honey." He put on the jacket. It pulled tight across the shoulders. He flexed, and I heard a thread pop. He froze. "I need to cut carbs," he whispered, staring at his reflection with genuine horror. That night at dinner, he ate nothing but lettuce. He looked miserable. I enjoyed my risotto with a glass of Pinot Noir, watching him mourn the loss of his metabolism. Step 2. The glow-up. Mark used a very specific, very expensive night cream. La Mer. It cost more than my first car. The jar was opaque, white ceramic. He applied it religiously before bed. I bought a bottle of high-strength gradual self-tanner, the kind that builds up over days, the kind labeled deep bronze for competitive bodybuilders. I mixed it into his night cream at a ratio of 20%, enough to work, slow enough to be unnoticed immediately. On day 3, he woke up looking healthy.
"I look rested," he said, admiring himself. "You're glowing," I agreed. On day 6, he looked like he'd spent a weekend in Miami. "I think the lighting in the bathroom is off," he said, scrubbing his face. "Do I look orange?" "Orange?" I laughed, a light tinkling sound. "Don't be silly. You look sun-kissed. It's the beta-carotene in your smoothies." On day 9, he looked like an Oompa Loompa in a spray tan addiction. The palms of his hands were turning a muddy terracotta. He stopped going to video conferences with his camera on. He started wearing turtlenecks. "I think I have jaundice," he told me, panic rising in his voice. "My liver is failing." "I'll make you a doctor's appointment," I said. I never made the appointment. I just told him the doctor said it was a vitamin toxicity and to ride it out. He was spiraling. His clothes didn't fit. His skin was turning the color of a traffic cone, and his confidence was evaporating like water on hot pavement. But the pièce de résistance was yet to come, the something worse. Mark had a presentation, the presentation.
He was pitching his firm's services to a massive conglomerate in Tokyo. This deal was his golden ticket to partner. He had been working on the slide deck for months. He had it saved on 3 different hard drives, the cloud, and a USB stick he kept on his keychain. He was paranoid about security, but he was also lazy with his passwords. Mark the Shark 82. It hadn't changed since college. The night before the presentation, while he was aggressively scrubbing his orange face in the shower, I logged in to his laptop. I didn't delete the presentation. That would be too obvious, too crude. I replaced the audio files embedded in the slides. Mark liked to use embedded video testimonials and slick transition sound effects. I went into the master file. I kept the visual thumbnails exactly the same, but I swapped the source audio. For the transition sound, usually a sharp, professional whoosh, I replaced it with a recording of a whoopee cushion, a wet, flatulent, prolonged noise.
For the CEO's video testimonial, I swapped the audio track with a clip I had ripped from a viral video of screaming goats. I saved the file. I re-uploaded it to the cloud. I synced it to his USB drive. I wiped my history. The morning of the presentation, Mark was a wreck. He was wearing his fat suit, an old suit from 5 years ago that I hadn't altered, and his face was a patchy, fading orange. He looked like a decaying pumpkin. "Wish me luck," he said, his voice trembling. "Knock 'em dead, Tiger," I said. I kissed his cheek. "Oh, by the way, I packed your lunch. Put a special treat in there." He didn't check. He just grabbed his briefcase and ran. The special treat was a container of homemade gumbo. I had laced it with Carolina Reaper pepper extract, not enough to kill him, but enough to induce a spiritual experience in his lower intestine within 30 minutes of consumption. He would eat lunch at 12. The presentation was at 1. I didn't go to the office. I didn't need to. I had access to the boardroom webcam.
I sat in our living room with a bowl of popcorn and tuned in. At 1 p.m., Mark walked into the boardroom. The Tokyo executives were seated, looking stern and expectant. Mark looked sweaty. He was pale beneath the fake tan, beads of perspiration cutting tracks through the orange. The pepper extract was working. He set up his laptop. He connected to the projector. He smiled, grimacing slightly as a cramp likely seized his gut. "Gentlemen," he began, his voice tight, "thank you for having me. Today, I want to show you the future of synergy." He clicked the remote to advance the slide. The sound blasted through the high-fidelity conference room speakers. It was unmistakably the sound of flatulence. It was loud. It was bass-heavy. Mark froze. The Japanese executives didn't move a muscle, but their eyes widened. Mark looked at his laptop. He hit the next slide, hoping to bypass the glitch. He turned red, clashing violently with his orange skin. I apologize.
There seems to be a technical glitch with the audio driver. "Please continue," the CEO said, his face a mask of stone. Mark sweated harder. He was shifting his weight from foot to foot. The Reaper was knocking at the door. "Right. Well, let's hear from our current clients." He clicked play on the video testimonial. On the screen, a distinguished man in a suit began to speak, mouthing words of praise. But the speakers didn't play his voice. They played the scream of a goat. "Bah! Bah!" Mark frantically hit the mute button, but in his panic, he hit the volume up. "Bah!"
The executives were exchanging glances now. Mark was hyperventilating. He tried to close the presentation, but his hands were shaking so badly he knocked his water glass over onto his crotch. So there he stood, orange-faced, wearing an ill-fitting suit, standing in a puddle of water that looked like he'd wet himself, while a goat screamed at full volume in a boardroom of billionaires. And then the internal pressure became too much. The Carolina Reaper demanded an exit. I saw Mark's eyes go wide. It was the look of a man who realizes he has lost the war against his own physiology. He dropped the clicker. He didn't say, "Excuse me." He didn't bow. He simply turned and sprinted out of the room, running with the awkward, clenched gait of a toddler trying to make it to the potty. He left the laptop open. The goat was still screaming. I closed my MacBook. I laughed until my sides hurt. I laughed until I was crying. It was the kind of laughter that cleanses the soul, a violent exorcism of 5 years of wasted loyalty. I filed for divorce the next day. I cited irreconcilable differences. Mark didn't fight me on the assets. He was too broken. He had been fired, obviously. The story of the farting goat presentation had circulated the industry within hours. He was a meme on LinkedIn. His reputation as the slick, controlled shark was dead, replaced by the image of a sweaty, orange man running from his own bodily functions. He moved into a small apartment across town. I kept the house. I kept the car. I kept my dignity. But the story doesn't end there. I promised you something worse. You see, revenge is a dish best served cold, but sometimes you leave a little bit of it in the oven for later. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, Mark was trying to rebuild. He had started dating Jessica officially, the yoga instructor from the photo. They were trying to launch a wellness brand together. It was pathetic, but he was trying. I still had access to his cloud. He never changed the password. He assumed I was done. He assumed the disaster at the office was just bad luck and bad takeout. He never suspected me. Why would he?
I was the supportive wife who tried to help him with his jaundice. I found a new folder in his drive, Wedding Ideas 2024. He was going to propose to her, using the money from his severance package to buy a ring. I decided to give him one final gift, a parting shot. I waited until the week he planned to propose. He had booked a trip to Paris. Very cliché. I went into the folder where he kept his digital travel documents, passports, boarding passes, hotel confirmations. I didn't delete them. I just tweaked them. I used Photoshop to subtly alter the QR codes on his digital boarding passes, just enough to make them unreadable by the scanners. Then I went into his email. Yes, I had that password too. And I found the confirmation for the engagement ring insurance. I canceled the policy. Then the masterstroke. I found the contact info for the hotel in Paris. I emailed the concierge from a spoofed address that looked like Mark's, requesting the special romantic package. I specifically requested that the room be filled with lilies. Hundreds of them.
Mark is deathly allergic to lilies. His throat closes up. His eyes swell shut. I imagined the scene. They get to the airport. The passes don't work. They miss the flight. They have to pay thousands for new tickets. They finally arrive in Paris, exhausted, stressed. Mark opens the door to the suite, ready to salvage the moment, ready to drop to one knee. And he is hit with a wall of pollen. His face swells up. The wheezing starts. The romance dies instantly, as Jessica has to call a French ambulance. But I wasn't watching this time. I didn't need to see it. Knowing it was happening was enough. I was sitting on the patio of the house I now owned, alone, drinking a glass of wine that cost more than Mark's new rent. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of violet and gold. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Mark. "Did you cancel the ring insurance?" I took a sip of wine. I typed back, "New phone, who this?" I blocked the number. The something worse wasn't just the humiliation or the allergies. It was the lingering paranoia I gifted him.
Because eventually he would figure it out. Eventually he would realize that his bad luck was too consistent to be random. And for the rest of his life, every time his Wi-Fi cut out, every time his credit card was declined, every time he couldn't find his keys, he would wonder, is she doing this? He would never be safe. He would never be private. He would look at every piece of technology with suspicion, haunting his own life like a ghost. I put the phone down and looked at the garden. I had hired a new gardener. He was young, handsome, and he didn't know how to use Google Drive. Perfect. I closed my eyes and listened to the wind in the trees. The air tasted sweet. It tasted like freedom, and a little bit like victory. The photo on the drive was still there, buried in the trash folder of a cloud account I no longer monitored, a digital fossil of a life that no longer existed. I didn't need it anymore. I had rewritten the metadata of my own life. And let me tell you, the resolution was crystal clear.